The senior chief broke off to the left toward the front of the building, and the kid broke right toward the rear. But the LC was shouting at them, and John, to fall back and get the hell out of there. In other words, it was a Dodge City. John understood why a moment later. He heard the whiz an instant before seeing the blinding flash of white light as the night detonated in front of him. The hot pressure of the shock wave made him rear back, his ears thundering with the powerful boom. The first time John had gone surfing, he'd been struck unexpectedly by a large wave and dragged under. The blast felt like that, but with fire. The debris that pummeled his body like bullets and the rock that struck him in the forehead and took him to the ground were secondary. All he could think about was the heat and feeling as if his lungs had been filled with fuel-fired air. When the blast of overwhelming heat finally receded, he choked in a few acrid breaths and looked around him in a daze. He couldn't see. A stab of panic penetrated the haze. Only when he tried to wipe his eyes did he remember the NVGs, which were now shattered. Jerking the goggles off and tossing them to the ground, he blinked as the world came into view. Dust, ash, and smoke were everywhere. It was like every doomsday movie he'd ever seen. Suddenly, he was aware of men around him, pulling at him and mouthing words to him. The world seemed to be moving in slow motion, and it took his brain a moment to catch up. The two men were Mickey and Jim Bob, a.k.a. Michael Ruiz and Travis Hart. "Are you all right?" he thought Ruiz was saying, but John's ears were ringing too loudly to hear anything. He nodded, remembering that Miggy, Jim Bob, and Dolph, Steve Spivak, had been well behind him when the missile hit the barracks in front of them. John had been a couple 100 feet away. Had he been any closer? He swore, remembering the kid and senior chief running past him. They'd been closer. And the LC? A moment later, his silent question was answered as the LC appeared out of the smoke with Dolph, both dragging the unconscious senior chief. It was hard to see what state Baylor was in the dark, but if he was half as bad as John felt, it couldn't be good. Miggy dropped down to look the senior chief over and administer first aid as necessary. Jim Bob was doing the same to John. Their corpsmen had been with the other squad, but they all had medical training. SEALs might have specialties, but what made them distinct was that they were trained to do any job. If someone went down, any one of them could step up and fill his shoes. John finally found his voice. "The kid?" The LC met his gaze and shook his head. Murphy was too close to the rear of the building where the first missile hit. There'd been more than one? Suddenly, the full importance and ramifications of what the LC said struck. If Murphy had been too close, the other squad, the other 7 men of Ricciarius, including his best friend and Bud's brother, Brandon Blake, had been inside the barracks building. The senior chief and Murphy must have been trying to warn them. John had to do something. He pushed Jim Bob away, told him he was fine, and struggled to his feet, swaying as he tried to find his equilibrium. Christ, his head hurt. The ground was spinning. He started to run, stumble, toward the orange inferno. But the LC had guessed his intent and grabbed his arm to hold him back. "It's too late," he yelled, his voice sounding like it was coming from the far end of a tunnel. "They're gone." Gone. The finality of that one word penetrated his shell-shocked brain. John wanted to argue. With every bone in his body, he wanted to deny the LC's words. But the truth was right in front of his face. The gulag was gone. Both the command and barracks buildings had been flattened. What was left was being incinerated before his eyes. He'd never been so close to one before, but he suspected what he was seeing. A thermobaric explosion. It was also known as a vacuum bomb, although this one had been...